Be careful, Commissioner Swaney, because we got a lot of, this is Michigan. We could have snow in May.
February is going to take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello again, everybody.
Morning.
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 Good morning.
Okay, you are live on YouTube. So when it is time, Chairman, you are ready.
Yep, we're just about there, so. Okay, it is 9 o'clock. I guess it's time to start the meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First up, we need to identify ourselves and the location. I will start off. I'm Frank Engler. I am participating from my home in Deerfield Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
Steve Swaney, participating from my home, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Isabella County.
I'm Jim Horton, participating from my home, Union Township, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Isabella County.
Okay, moving on, we got kind of a short agenda. We'll call for a call to the public. Nicole, is there anybody there?
There is no public attending at this time, Mr. Chairman.
We'll give it just a little bit of time and move on. Okay, if there's no public comments, we will move forward to our agenda item, which is moving on the application for the Fodor Farms LLC for the Farmland and Open Space Preservation Program, or more commonly known as PA 116. I'm not too sure how, Commissioner Swaney, how familiar you are with 116. I can go through it. If not, we see these questions.
I would love if you would go through it. I was going to ask questions about the details now that I'm in criminal justice and these things are, I guess, part of my duties. So,
Okay, this was Act, I think it was 1994. It's been amended. Basically, it is for the preservation of farmland. What it is a contract between the landowner and the state of Michigan that you promise that you'll keep your land in agriculture for a certain amount of years. And you get back, you'll get a certain tax relief depending on your income, on your property taxes. So for years when you're making money, lots of money, then the tax relief is less. But in years, farming is very up and down. So in bad years, tax bills can be quite substantial, to say the least. Also, if you got some retirees that have land and they're renting it out, it also helps them because their incomes are usually generally low. And sometimes the property tax can get pretty extensive. I know we pay, I don't know, probably up 30,000 or better a year just on our little property. So, so on a bad year, it can be kind of restrictive. There are provisions in there, some exemptions. Typically, you can get out of the contract, but you have to pay back the last 7 years of your tax gain on there. The contract can be transferred with very little. If another person buys a property and wishes to keep that in to 116, you can transfer that contract over very easily. I think I hit all the minor basic details. I know most of the county government, usually it goes through either the township, I think the conservation district, and one of the other local governments. Usually have to make comments, and if it doesn't, then it comes to the county board, if I'm correct. like I said, most of the time I can't ever remembering us turning one down. Usually
Mhm.
what we do is check to see if the contract's filled out correctly. I believe we do have the authority to not allow a 116. It does
Right.
remove tax revenue from the state, but I know most organizations, the Farm Bureau, and the county boards in the past have supported the farmland 116.
Okay.
Just because, as my grandpa always said, you can't make new land. So once it's gone and
Hmm.
development, some of the best development land sits where Walmart and Sam's Club, that used to be some of the best farmland in the county. So
Dollar General.
yeah.
Oh,
So
you inherited that one, Steve. You can thank me for that inheritance on your part. So,
Thanks.
Frank, can I mention something real quick?
yeah,
Or is
go
it-
ahead.
Yeah, I've always thought of this as, you hit right at the very end of your talk there, Frank, was made a good point with the Walmarts and the Sam's Club and developing it. I think that's the big reason why this came into place, is to preserve the farmland. Growing up in Flint, Michigan, or the Flint area, I grew up in Swartz Creek. Mark can tell you where Swartz Creek is at, and with Owasso. We kind of on the buffer, if you want to think of it like that. On one end of my area where I lived, we were all pretty much metropolitan or urban. And we had 4-lane roads, highways, shopping malls, everything like that. You drive out to the other end of my school district, or other end of that area, you saw just the opposite. You had farms, you had everything like that. So and that's how I've always kind of thought, is preserving the edges of the type of Swartz Creek area and allowing the other ends to go on. So I think from a policy standpoint, I did have a comment real quick though, before we take a motion on this
Yeah.
application. I did notice they did not check how long. It says
Yeah.
between 10 and 90 years, but there's no time frame, and they didn't put anything down. So is there a
That was going to be
statutory?
one of my questions as well.
Yeah, was it a statute? Is it like a statutory minimum where it's automatically defaults to 10 if they don't put anything down, or they have to put something down?
I was going to suggest that we send this back and that before the next board meeting, because I think it was probably just an oversight, but that has to be filled out before it can go
Okay.
forward.
Okay.
That's always one of the hardest things to decide. You got a gap in there from, what is it, 9 to 90. So I know we've had to do it. So how long do you put it in? So that's usually one of the toughest decisions you have to make. So that does need to be in there.
Okay.
Like I said, I would suggest to the board that we just have that filled in before the next meeting. Everything else needs to be in line, small, pretty small, 10 acres, 1 acre is not farmable. So, since you are new to this, Steve, we've seen
Mhm.
several motor farms coming in. I think they've just formed an LLC. So this is about the third or fourth one we've seen. So they must be doing some transition from
Mhm.
personal property into LLC. You can argue with
So-
the strategy if that's a good one or not, regardless. But yes,
You think,
Right.
do you think they do that on a state planning basis, Frank, or what obviously you're the expert in
probably a
this field.
state. It's probably an estate planning deal. They bought a lot of property the last couple of years. Was curious, and I was going to go back and try to. I haven't had time to do it, but in Steve, our treasurer's report, Steve Pickens' report on the delinquent tax, they actually had photo farms actually had a property in delinquent or back tax for the last 3 years, but on this form, the taxes all have to be up paid. So they're probably just doing a lot of transition. A little bit different. Sometimes the argument is that you do not want to put a lot of personal property into a group because it's a little harder to do it. I guess it depends on if there's partners involved or who's involved in the LLC. Of course, you put it in an LLC, you get some private protection as far as liability, a little greater than you would if you owned it by personal. But a lot of times, if you're running that out, you put that in the contract, so liability. So it's a complicated process to move property the next generation or the next farm. So there's always a lot of tax.
So on that, the deed here was 2011 for $1. Is that just where they moved it to the LLC from personal property? Is that?
You'll see that a lot on deeds because people don't want to know how much they paid for the property. So a lot of times they'll put $1 in there. I've always kind of wondered if that's, you put a document out there and they didn't pay $1 for it. But you'll see that a lot when people do not want it a public record what you paid for a piece of property. So it's not uncommon to see that. I guess it's not illegal, but they'll put that down usually for the transfer purposes. But a lot of times they just don't know what they paid for a piece of property. So
Okay.
you know how those farmers are, once they find out what it is, everybody knows what it is. So
Right. So that's not something where it was just a transition from them to their LLC. It could have been a sale of property. And it's not something where they're keeping the taxable value.
no, that doesn't affect that. You'll see it a lot in developers, real estate developers a lot of times.
Okay.
Margaret, did you have a question?
I was just going to add on, Commissioner Engler obviously is the expert in this for us on this committee and on the board, but I would say that I was born and raised on a 3rd-generation farm in northern Shiawassee County in New Haven Township. And there were 4 brothers in my dad's family, and eventually they all had, 3 of them farms were contiguous, the other one was a mile away, and we all grew up in that, cousins and aunts and uncles in that big atmosphere. But I do know that my parents' property went into this public act before 1994 because my parents passed away in 1990. And my dad was one of the, first farmers around our area who entered into this and, or whatever the predecessor to this was. And when my parents passed away, just for interest, my siblings and I, the only person who lives in this area, decided to keep the farm and go into partnership. So we maintained, the farmland agreement. And then when we sold the farm in 1996, our intention was that although we had frontage on 3 roads, and it probably would have been financially better for us to sell lots on those 3 roads, which we certainly could have, we chose to preserve the farm. And so one of the things when we were selling the farm in the negotiations was with the next person, whoever that was going to be, they had to agree to a farmland agreement also. So Commissioner Engler is right. The whole intention of this is to incentivize the agricultural community to be able to keep that land agricultural. Mm-hmm. And try to encourage this passage of the torch with family farms. And Mr. Engler will tell you better than I can. It's very difficult to do these days. It's just people have different interests than they did 50 years ago. It's just a different way of doing things. But whenever these come through, there's always just something that makes me kind of sentimental because I think it's great that they're keeping the property in farmland as we move forward. And as much as we can do that in our county, the better for our community.
Okay.
Right, so,
yes.
Commissioner Engler, so your recommendation is to move it forward to the work session?
Pending correction, pending the fill in the corrections, I guess.
We'll take care of trying to get that happen.
I'm sorry, you broke up, Margaret.
Well, my department, we'll take care of trying to get that to happen before Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, then, so I'll make a motion, move to bring forward the Photo Farms LLC farmland agreement application and instruction, and instruct the Isabella County Clerk to forward the approved application to MDA Farmland and Open Space Program pending completion of the application.
I'll second that. There's a motion that's been moved and supported. Is there any more discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion has passed. With that, we'll move on with the agenda. I guess A call to public is in order. Nicole, is there any public out there?
There is not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seeing none, if there isn't any more business before this committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Short and
Thank
sweet.
you.
14 minutes, Frank. There you go.
It was a long one because of me. Had to do training.
If I knew we were taking score on there, it would have went differently, Joe.
Well, you know, hey, there you go. You guys, take care. I'll see you guys. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Everyone.
Stay safe.
Bye.